everyone, it's Amy here and welcome to video 5 in our back to school video series. So in today's video I wanted to talk to you about expectations and what you can expect of the different year levels that you might be teaching this year. So I know when I was going to my first classroom as a teacher, I was given a year 1-2 classroom. I had been told that the year 2s that were put in my classroom were at a year 1 level, and that's why they had been put in my split, and that was it. That was all I was told. Now I had done a prac in a grade 1 classroom before. It was a P1-2 split. And so I had no idea what to expect from these grade 1s. I was asking questions like, will they be able to read? Will they be able to write? Like, am I teaching alphabetical letters? Like, I just had no clue. And I'm not going to sit here and feel stupid about not knowing what to expect from grade 1s, because the fact is, if I was thinking it, there's probably a lot of people out there who every single year think the exact same thing. Like, oh my gosh, what do I do with these kids? What are they capable of? And this can be applicable not just to new grads going into a year level for the first time, but also experienced teachers who've suddenly been told, hey, look, you've been a year 6 teacher for the last 10 years, now you're in grade 1. Like, there are so many times in your career where you could come up with this issue of just not knowing what they're capable of. I do want to give a bit of a disclaimer here though, that this is just like a combination of my experience in these year levels and like an average of my classrooms, so it could differ greatly. You could get a class that is way above what you expect or way below, just because of the different dynamics of classes, different locations, different states. Like, there's so many things that can make up and make these different, but hopefully this will just give you a rough idea of what to expect, so then you can base your planning around that and just know what is possible and what is probable. Okay, so let's start off with year 1s. I'm not going to do foundation because I have never taught in foundation other than being in that P1-2 split class for a day a week for like a term in my first year prac. I've never been in a pre-primary classroom to really tell you what they're going to start off with, but I would recommend that they're probably just drawing pictures and making things. I wouldn't be expecting any writing from them. So in a grade 1 classroom, you can expect that most of the students are going to know how to complete a sentence. They're going to be able to sound out words, simple words, and they are going to be able to write a cohesive sentence. So something like on the weekend. Weekend is probably a word that you're going to have to give them. I went swimming, and swimming, they can probably sound it out. They might have most of the letters arranged there, but they should be able to attempt it. They may need a little bit of encouragement to attempt the word, and having a classroom where you do support, you know, that they might make a mistake and that it's okay to not spell the word right. Or if you're in a classroom that uses Have a Go pads, then that's probably a word that they are going to come up to you with to write for them. They may use capital letters and full stops, but more than likely they've forgotten since pre-primary that they need to use them. You're probably going to need to remind them. But on average, most of them are going to be able to write 1 to 2 sentences. Your more able students are probably going to be able to get a page of year 1 sized writing done, which ends up being about 3 or 4 sentences. Then you're probably going to have quite a few kids who are very reluctant to write because they either can't yet, they don't have the fine motor abilities to really bring their letters together, they haven't really got confident in sounding out or attempting unknown words yet, and from them you probably either want to scribe it for them and have them copy it. So what I usually like to do is write it on their lines at the size that they're writing, and then leave a line underneath where they copy directly underneath what I've written, and then I start writing on the next line and they copy directly underneath that. For students who are even weaker than that, you may want to do a tracing thing, so use a light coloured pencil, maybe even a yellow pencil if they have no eye issues, and write it for them and then ask them to trace over the top. It's really hard to pick those students who are just very reluctant and scared to attempt to write and those who actually really can't. So on the first few days of school, I wouldn't push it. I'd go to the level that they feel comfortable. So if they ask you to write it down for them because they see you doing it for someone else, write it down for them. But then eventually, as you get a little bit of time and you get to know them a little bit more, sit with them and ask them like, hey, can you write the word on for me? And then sit there as they try and attempt it. And then you can know whether it's a factor of just needing to push them a little bit more and getting that relationship up where they understand that they can attempt things and maybe not necessarily get everything right. or whether they just need more help with their learning. In a Year 1 classroom, you're going to want to keep your instructions very simple. So probably only give one instruction at a time. So for example, saying things like you need to get out your pencil, your ruler, and go to your back tray and get out your maths book, probably going to be too much for them unless you're constantly reminding them of those 3 things, or putting something up on the board like pencil, ruler, and you've got a picture of their book and saying you need these three things out that they can refer back to. So you're going to want to keep your instructions simple. And if you are using things like worksheets, then you're probably going to want to explain to them what you want them to do on the worksheet, give them an example of how to fill in that worksheet, and then ask them to repeat back to you what it is you're doing on this worksheet. Let them get started and then check around as to who has actually remembered the instruction and been able to do it. You definitely can't give them a worksheet and just expect them to go and do it. They're not going to be able to read most of the instructions. They are going to need you to walk them through each part of the worksheet. In terms of lines, like writing lines, it differs greatly from state to state and school to school. So I definitely recommend, if you have another teacher in your school who's at the same grade level as you, ask them what they're using. So for example, over in WA, a lot of us use dotted thirds, which means we have a line at the top and then a dotted line and then another dotted line and then a line at the bottom. And so a letter like A would fit between the bottom straight line and the dotted line. That's an A. A capital would go up to the top dotted line and nothing sits in the space on top. Now I use that when I was in grade 1, I would go straight into that. But most of the kids will not have used that paper in pre-primary, so they'll have no idea how to write on it. So you're basically just asking them to write on the straight line, and they can get a bit confused with that. So while I chose to use that paper, a lot of teachers actually will go to just a single line with a big amount of space between each line and just ask the kids to write on that. I've also seen students who have transferred in my class from other schools where they have just written in a plain blank scrapbook where there are no lines. Now personally, I don't like that. I think by grade 1 you can expect them to start writing on a line, and I think a lot of pre-primary classes have given students experience with writing on a line. But that's another thing you can do as well, is go to the pre-primary teacher and say, well, what were these students doing at the end of the year? Were they writing on lines? Were they writing on blank paper? You don't want to set the students up for failure by like putting dotted thirds in front of them and just expecting them to be able to just know exactly how to use them, or whatever line your lines are called in your state. We differ so much between states and it's so frustrating. But yes, check with the teacher from the year level beforehand and check with any other teachers in your grade and just try and do what they're doing. So if the grade 1 teacher next door is just using lines, then you're probably better off just using lines as well. That's going to help you with your parents as well. Then with their lessons, don't have lessons running for longer than 30 minutes of one thing. So let's say you're doing a recount writing activity of what they did on the holidays. So you do your explanation time, which maybe takes up 5 to 10 minutes. Then maybe they're working for 10 to 15 minutes on their writing bit and then they're colouring. That's the lesson done. You wouldn't expect to drag that out much more. I did work my students up to hour-long lessons, but within that we were doing a lot of different things. So say for instance, if I was doing a text type lesson, we might start the lesson doing some sort of matching sort. Then we might do a component where we're sharing a reading of a text type example and picking out the features. And then we might end the lesson with them doing a writing activity if they're actually writing something down. So they're constantly like moving and they're doing different things. You wouldn't expect to give them a 10-minute instruction time, 30 minutes writing, and then 10 minutes conclusion. Like that's a bit too long for them. By year 2, students should all be capable of writing independently. Again, this is going to vary quite a lot. You might have one student who's very reluctant to write, might need a lot of encouragement to write, but they should be capable of sounding out. They should be capable of writing things down, and you would be expecting them, with the amount of lines they have, to at least be doing about half a page at the beginning of year 2. Remember though, most of these kids, when they come back in from summer, is they've had the summer slide and they've forgotten like most of the stuff they've learnt and the last year. So walk them into it slowly and be forgiving of them and say like, oh, my brain's really tired too, and how do I write, or what does an O look like, and how do I use this line? Like, you can act not stupid, but like you can act like you've forgotten everything too, and so it's a way of helping them remember what they need to do and how to write, and then they feel a little bit more willing to have a go. Year 2s can have a few more instructions, so you can say things like go to your back tray and get out this, this and this, but again, probably numbering it off and breaking it up into smaller parts when you can will help them remember things. They will start to be able to read instructions on worksheets, but it still needs you to explain it. It still needs you to probably go through each question. Like let's say you're doing a maths worksheet and it's got 5 different types of activities on it. You're going to want to stop them before each activity and tell them how to do that activity or what that question's asking them to do, as opposed to sitting down and telling them this is the whole worksheet, now go do the whole worksheet. And again, this is at the beginning of the year, so like at the end of year 1, the year 2s are probably a little bit further along than that, but when you bring them back to the beginning of year 2, they've had that summer slide, so you just want to make it a bit more basic for them. In year 3, you'd be expecting them to all write about half a page. They should have their full stops and capital letters, although let's face it, we have to remind them to include it, but they should know how to use it. They should be experimenting with some different punctuation, and they should be able to read a worksheet and actually get through it mostly independently. So you should be able to say, okay, here's the worksheet, go through it all with them, give it to them, and then they should be able to go off and do it all without you needing to stop and explain every single one. Although you'll probably find there's a couple of students who still need that. You'll peg them quite quickly and you'll be able to go up to them and be able to stand next to them and go, okay, so we're up to this question now, this is what you need to do for this question. Year 4 is pretty much the same thing. They can follow much longer instructions. They can do worksheets independently. They can read most of the things that you're going to give them. And by year 5, maybe year 4, year 5, they should be using paragraphs independently without you having to remind them at the beginning of the year. Again, though, it really depends on what the previous year's teacher was doing, and it is the beginning of the year, so you may have to mention paragraphs a couple of times. They should be writing half a page minimum of their size booklet. Some of them will try and write less. Yep, you're going to get the ones that only want to write one sentence, but push them. Most of them on average should be capable of doing half a page. And then by year 6, they should be doing a whole page of writing, paragraphs easily. There shouldn't be as much of a summer slide for year 6s coming back into it. So that's a bit of an overview about what you can expect from the different grade levels. Obviously on top of that, then you've got composite classes, so ones that are made up of lots of different year levels. I'm not going to talk too much about that in this video series. However, if you do have a composite class, I do have a PD session on composites because I have had them a fair few times now, so I will link to that. Please go check that out if you'd like to know more about composite classrooms. So I know today's video for a lot of you probably seemed really simple, but I hope there are some of you out here that this video helped and that I wasn't alone in not knowing what on earth a grade 1 could do. I hope that's kind of explained it for you and given you a bit of an idea. I'll catch you guys next week in Monday's video all about behaviour management. See ya!